Afternoon, and welcome to this week's episode of Supply Chain Talk, our first returning from the summer break, and we're now in our fourth season. So welcome everyone, and in a moment I'll be introducing my guests and we'll discuss a news item. But firstly, for those of you who are new to particularly to the new format, we're now in Zoom. So if you are in Zoom, remember to open the chat panel so you can join into the chat and share your insights and questions, which we'll try and address as much as we can. If you're not in Zoom and are watching perhaps on LinkedIn Live, do register via Business Reporter, probably not right now, but ready for next time, because it does mean you can then participate in the discussion. And as is always customary in our discussion, we will be awarding a Supply Chain Talk mug for the contribution that we find most useful this afternoon. So let me welcome the first of my three guests, and she is Amy Su, who is Head of Supply Chain at Dishman Carbogen Amix Europe, based in London. And Dishman is a global outsourcing partner for pharmaceutical companies, offering a portfolio of products and development, scale-up and manufacturing services. Amy has managed many successful projects, and a recent one was a critical, complex Brexit risk mitigation project, which was necessary to retain the European client base. And that project had a absolutely non-negotiable 6 months deadline, and the project was delivered within that with zero loss of business. So I'm sure there'll be some great insights Amy can share on that. And away from work, Amy enjoys jogging in the park, reading philosophy, cooking and traveling the world. So welcome, Amy. My second guest is Daria Kitsenko, who is Program Manager for Operations at Accel Group. She's based in Groningen in the Netherlands, and Accel make bicycles, bicycle parts and accessories, both traditional bicycles and e-bikes. And Daria has over 15 years experience in procurement and supply chain, and her most recent role is in the area of new product introduction, where she leads a team of project managers to deploy MPI initiatives. And Daria is a keen outdoor explorer, spending much free time and holidays in the mountains, so I guess away from the Netherlands, skiing, downhill cycling or climbing, and everything to make sure she keeps up with her 9-year-old. So welcome, Daria. And finally, Pavan Prasad is Senior Director Consulting for Supply Chain for the Pharma and Life Sciences at Genpact. He's also based in London, and he is a Senior Director at Genpact, focusing on those sectors for the EMEA region. He specializes in delivering transformation projects from business case preparation through to technology implementation, and he has much first-hand experience of guiding large-scale supply chain change programs. And away from work, Pavan enjoys going on walks and nature trails when he's not catching up on the cricket. Welcome all three of you. And let's turn to our a news item, which is from earlier this year. It's on supplychaindigital.com, and it talks about a successful supply chain transformation for Heineken. But before describing what Heineken did, it reminds us that 70%, according to Deloitte survey, 70% of digital transformations result in failure. And often the cause of failure is a mismatch between the tech initiative itself and the business goals. And behind those mismatches, there's often a lack of executive leadership, an absence of collaborative culture, failure to get the right people in place to see the project through, and mistaking a change project as being tech-driven rather than people-driven. So some great points about why projects fail. It then describes a very good success story of Heineken, which achieved some really great results in product simplification, reduced packaging, and in particular, cutting 25 separate country supply chain and operations planning teams to just one planning team. So massive change there. And finally, it talks about some of the ways they achieve that change, and Heineken set up a transformation management office, which they reckoned was vital for success because it allowed a sort of ninja, as they described it, to force the transformation through, or to really drive the transformation while allowing the rest of the organization to focus on business as usual. And they also really were aware of the people part of the logistics transformation in terms of three things: leadership, capabilities, and communication. So lots of great insights about failure and success there. So Amy, what struck you as what they did particularly well?
One of the common can relate to very much is the change management is not only about technology but more about people, because we have experienced and observed the same project implemented into two different sites. But because the sites, the colleague at the two different sites, the experience with the expectation or the experience with the tool is completely different. So which leads us the completed outcome for the implementation. For one site, that the colleague has much stronger willingness to do the implementation because their daily work is somehow restricted by the old tool. So they have much strong willingness to devote their time to take extra spare time, to make extra special efforts to the change management projects. So the whole project runs much more smoothly and without much involvement from the senior management, because everyone's happy, and also although everyone worked very hard, but the whole atmosphere is very nice. But for the other side, the colleagues are relatively happy with their existing tool, so the resistance is slightly stronger. So the experience with that side is completely different. Although the implementation is for exactly the same tool, but the project team has to spend extra time interpreting the purpose of the project, and yeah, I think there's also, it takes much longer time, also extra communication. So the general experience is it's more about, at least for this project, it's more about people other than the technology itself.
Okay, no, thank you. Daria, what struck you about the comments in the article about Heineken and so on?
I think what drew my attention the most, it was the fact that when they talk about results of this transformation, there is actually no word about anything digital. They speak about product and packaging simplification, ways of work, how did they set up the teams. And I think this speaks by itself in terms of how they did set the priorities, putting business goals and people in front of just delivering agile transformation, etc. So I found this very, very good to notice. And another thing, which was not in the article itself, there was a little video afterwards as well about this project. They did put an attention on experiments and pilots to drive that within different teams first before scale it to the rest of the organization, which I think is also key to the success of the whole story.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually, that it wasn't really positioned as a big digital transformation. It was a supply chain transformation, but the system part of things wasn't really emphasized, hugely. So that's an interesting point. And Pavan, what are your thoughts? Having seen many big transformation projects, do you think Heineken did it perfectly?
I think the results speak for itself, right? So it's a pleasant surprise to look at it. And you highlighted the number about like 70% failure, right, which is quite high. In the research, they actually also highlight that if you go to adoption, it's further down. So it's 30 to 40% in terms of adoption. So what I like, Thibaut called out in the Heineken case as well in the end about people capabilities, right? So focus on people, as Amy pointed out, right? Also looking at the capabilities that they are ready to adopt to the change when actually you go live, right? So it's very crucial. Otherwise, you can do all of that and you can't really achieve the results that Heineken did without making people capable and then really adopt the change, right? So that was really something that stood out as a theme for me.
Okay, no, thank you. Well, I think we're going to pick up on I think all your different points in the more detailed of the gender points in a moment. So let's turn to our main topic, which is change management in supply chain operations. And we'll start with a quick audience poll. So surprisingly, we haven't seen many chat comments yet. So remember to open the chat window if you haven't already. But hopefully the poll will appear on your screens without you having to do anything. And the question is, which is the most important success factor in supply chain transformation? So in your view, just say which you think is the most important success factor of the choice of 5 offered there. And we'll see whether we agree or disagree with what the article was pointing at as well. So we'll just give everyone a moment to to use the poll, and yeah, it's at the moment we're certainly focusing on the kind of what one might say is the softer people side of things, with communication and people and culture very much being there. So I think probably, I imagine that everyone has managed to click who's able to. I think it might be that not so many of you are logged on via the business reporter kind of registration. So let's see the results there. So yeah, so basically it's 40% say communication, 60% say people and culture, and interestingly, no one is saying the scope and planning, though there was that point in the article about, you know, a mismatch of thinking it's a technological, you know, transformation and not really necessarily aligning it with the business goals. So those mismatches in scope and planning can be important, but clearly communication, people and culture are the key ones that everyone's focused on. So let's move to the first of our agenda points in our main topic, which is strategies for seamless implementation of new technologies, and perhaps picking up the word, the seamless implementation. And certainly in my experience, and I'm sure with all of you, I've seen patterns where a transformation's gone wrong because it's just gone too quickly without adequate testing. But at the same time, I've also seen transformations which have sort of rather kind of ground to a bit of a halt because the momentum just has stalled. It's just taken so long, and the sort of sense of purpose has gone. So, Amy, turning back to you, what's your feeling about how do you judge and get the speed of implementation right?
The speed of implementation, I think it depends case by case. Because some projects, like the Brexit projects I involved, which has a fixed deadline, we have to get the project done before a certain period of time. And some other type of projects, the deadline is flexible. So first we have to distinguish the difference, like how flexible or how fixed the deadline is. But in general speaking, I would measure the implementation speed according to the program progressing, like cut the program, supplement the program into several key milestones, and against from time to time judge the overall progress. The project progressing against this key milestone. Have we achieved this key milestone on time, or is there any delay? If there is, what is the reason? And do we need to, are we still able to like finish the final results in time, or do we need some extra time? So I would say we leaving some buffering time at the early stage is always helpful, because it's common that when we implement the change management, there's always something unexpected popping up that we need to work we have to work, pick up some extra work, which is, you know, with some buffering time. It's always helpful to not to add too much additional pressure on top of the already hectic work everyone is involved. And also it kind of help to have calm down the have a friendly or have a less frustrating atmosphere around the project program, which is I feel it's also quite important for the overall project.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you. And this interesting point you make there about sort of reviewing and having that flexibility to sort of adjust the timing as you go on, and so there is that sort of balance of wanting to publish a timetable and keep to it to sort of show, hey, we're doing what we said, versus actually adjusting the timing if it's appropriate to. So that's an interesting point you make there. Daria, what are your thoughts on the speed of implementation?
Well, first of all, I do agree with all above said. Will not spend too much time repeating. But this question first reminded me of a joke my dad always used to make, talking about any project. He used to say that whatever budget and timeline that you plan, you need to multiply it by number pi, 3.14. So to get your realistic expectation, I think that is speaks to this 70% of failure rate very, very well. But on a serious note, I think it really depends on how far you are today from your future state, and that understanding of the future state very well. And then it resonates with me very much what Amy said about extra time at the beginning, because preparation is a big part of that. And even though scope and planning didn't score that many many votes in our poll. I think this is an important part, because this is the point where you can measure the complexity, the resource needed, and maybe look at the scenarios. With more resource and more budget, you will achieve quicker timeline and vice versa. So I would say that assessment in the beginning is very important, and as well as we need to consider the size of organization, because to implement something for a company that is based in one country and serving one market is one thing, and implement it on a global scale can be a bit of a different story.
Yeah, thank you. Pavan, what are your thoughts on this one?
I agree with Daria that we could be probably underselling scoping and planning here a little bit. So in terms of pace, you're right, like right at the stage where you are designing the change, right? It's very important that you put the buffer zones at appropriate place. You also take into account what other change initiatives are going on in the project, because within the organization, you would be having the same people, either being a supply chain planner or a planning system, but also in a transaction system, you might be going from ECC, ERP to S4, right? And that is a very intensive program in itself, or doing some sort of process change, as like we saw just in the case study, right? So it's very important that we balance that design with other initiatives and then look at the pace. And obviously the propagating within the design. The only thing that I might want to add is also how you measure that pace, right? It's very important. So for a mid-tier life sciences organization, we are deploying APS system, right? One of the key parameters we measured is planner comfort, right? And if you do that, because if you just look at the timeline, you could be hitting the milestones there of UAT, right? And you would say, hey, I think we're good to go. But if the planner comfort is low, I don't think so, right? So you might need to add some time, and that's where the buffer zones are important. So it's very important that you measure and how you measure that pace, right? So that's the only thing probably I might add there. But okay. I'll agree with all the points that I said earlier.
Yeah, no, thank you, and I like Daria. I like your rule of pi. I've heard double the budget and double time scale, but multiplied by 3.14 sounds very precise, but gives you that extra generous buffer. Let's move to our second point, which is around enhancing supply chain resilience and adapting to the disruption that change brings. And I guess, well, as the article said, and as I'm sure we've all found, in supply chain operations and in transformation projects in that world, we often have to manage change while still keeping business as usual running. And the article in particular mentioned the key role for Heineken of having that transformation management office. And as the article said, that TMO office was driving the change while the rest of the organization could focus on the day-to-day business. Amy, do you think that's an effective approach, or do you think it's really important that people are kind of who are running the business actually really own and drive the project? So separate project teams, or a sort of a business-led project team?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to me, because in the end, the change management, the ultimate purpose is trying to enhance the overall business performance. So on top, we don't know the management, and that of course they don't want to see any negative impact that the change management program bring to the organization. We have to maintain the regular business, normal business ongoing. So the transformation management officer allows the other team members involved in the project. They can still have time to focus to run the daily business, but that person, he or she will be dedicated, or be have a central control on the overall project to manage the key timeline, to figure out what is the critical issue, and try to find ask additional resources, trying to sort out the key issue. Having said that, I also noticed sometimes having just transformation management office will not be enough, because some depend on the project, because some projects will require involvement from several different function, like the production function, R&D function, finance, HR, or any other function. So sometimes it makes sense also to select one key contact person from each department that the transformation management officer has to have regular interaction with, trying to understand the feedback and the progress from each functional team, and try to understand if everything is running well. If there is some issue, it can also utilize this key key person from each department as a bridge to try to help them to sort out the issue, to understand what the situation, and to give them extra support to help them, pull them along with the overall transformation project. So yeah, I think it makes sense. Also, it might be worthwhile, while organization is having the transformation project, it's also worthwhile to keep an eye on the KPI, the business key factor. If the normal business is in impact, if like the sales is impacted in the end, we still want to maintain the healthy business ongoing, which also will give more confidence for the overall all the colleagues in the organization that the project is running well, and to give them to engage them more for this change management program.
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely. And those KPIs can be so important for communication at all levels, really, to encourage everyone and reassure. Daria, what are your thoughts on the sort of roles of a transformation management office or a program management office versus getting the individual functions to sort of to do a lot of the running?
Look, I think from the organization I'm coming from, or from my previous experience also in BAT, my observation is often it's a luxury to have a proper organization to manage a project. That's at least if I do my, let's say, 80-20 analysis from the project, projects that I've seen, including the large ones. However, I do agree this is quite a crucial point in the organization. But then to support what Emmy said earlier, there should be a very clear link with business as usual teams as well. First, for them to understand what we are doing, for them to bring input, because in the end, they are the ones who will be working with this new environment, with the new tools, within the new process, etc. And in my recent role, which is actually running a change and transformation in the factory right now, in your introduction, you spoke about NPI. It's maybe due to me not updating my LinkedIn profile on time. But over the last few months, I am working with our management team in Axel Netherlands factory. We are going through a major restructuring process. And actually, a big part of my work is related to how our supply chain and planning teams are running. And here, from the learnings that I've got, the involving the team properly on an early stage is one of the key success factors. I did a few flipovers myself with that team as well. So I do think there is always that balance that you need to find. Yes, you cannot take off the operational resource from their job. They have to deliver, and there have to be enough of that resource to achieve the KPIs. However, there should be people dedicated to the change who don't lose that long-term picture of where we are going. We're able to communicate and bring people back to that page and deliver on time, hopefully.
Yes, yeah, no, okay, and that sort of fits in, I think, with what the article was saying also.
Yeah, exactly.
About the need that often, of course, a failure is not having enough capability and resources.
Exactly, and as I mentioned, that I found it interesting, those experiment groups that they've done. So, which is really, again, I think ideally, if we want successful implementation, we have to find resources to make it available, to do enough of those tests before we scale the change, because as you said before, there's quite a lot of changes. We can find a lot of use cases where the change was run very quickly, but without proper testing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And Pavan, what again your thoughts on how to sort of resource organize, manage a project through with minimum disruption?
Okay, no, absolutely sold on the idea of having a TMO, right? Because of the fact that they are also well placed and well equipped to pool the resources from across the organization, right? So you might need cross-functional resources, and if the change touches more than one department, which is mostly the case if you're looking at transformations, you would need that kind of TMO. It's really useful, and not just pooling of resources, also pooling of budget, right? So it's very much equipped. The only thing we should also keep an eye that there needs to be a link with the specific business, because sometimes TMO become, let's say, organization with less teeth, less power, with the function that's actually going to get impacted, right? How do you control the resources that you need there? So there needs to be a link with the change agents, so to say, right? That's critically important. And I would say, if again, depending on what sort of organization and what maturity of the organization is, it may help if you can actually go a step up and have a COE approach in change, that you have center of excellence, right? So not just transformation office, but you do have then COE roles which are focusing on process ownership, data ownership, and so on, right? So again, coming from another experience with a big pharma co, again, so I think the point that you said, Daria, about like it also depends of organization size. Like sometimes having a TMO or COE could be a luxury. So that's the caveat from this experience. That was again a Europe-based big pharma co. They had a COE, and it was like really, really useful. You can't really overstate that, to get critical resources when you need it, just because they were at a point where they also had and also technology leadership within the COE, right? So they had experts and SMEs which could be mobilized at short notice, right? So having a TMO, and I said, like, if you could have a COE, super, right? That would really help in deploying a change.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And sort of staying with the sort of the idea of resilience and making sure that the change doesn't become disruptive. And also ties in a little bit the whole planning thing. So I've often seen proposals for change, and you know, whether that's kind of, well, often you say equipment and automation and things like that, which are based on average volumes. Everything's based on averages, and obviously that's a very risky basis to plan anything. And you know, thinking of, Daria, what you're doing in your factory transformation, I mean, it's all about flow through, and anything that suddenly you get a bottleneck which you hadn't expected, or something can't cope with a small peak in demand, suddenly you're in a bad way. So I kind of wonder, in terms of simulation and digital twins, have any of you kind of worked, you know, using digital twins or simulation to really model what might happen, even if that's the case of saying, well, during this change period, it might take people a few seconds longer to do a transaction on the screen while they get used to it, or it might take them longer to do something because they're not used to new equipment. So Amy, interested in your thoughts on the role of digital twins or simulation modeling to reduce risk in transformation.
In our organization, we didn't have the chance to use digital twin, but I'm aware digital twin is one of the buzzwords in the industry, and it can potentially help, especially the mass manufacturing, a lot in terms of the change management, how to better mitigate the risk. So I'm sure it's one of the areas we need to watch out. But during our change management project, one of the way we measure the process is to keep a close eye on the critical business KPI, and see if along with the project, if our business run as usual, if our customer happy, if the sales remain at the same level as how it is supposed to be. We utilize them as some of the key criteria to measure the process. It's not the only way, but this is the way.
Yeah.
It is one of the measure we find it's helpful for us.
Yes, yeah, and certainly those are kind of broader measures, like you say, customer satisfaction, sales, and so on. But there can be very detailed operational measures, really detailed, down to sort of sensor level within an operation, to say, oh, well, we haven't hit a critical problem, but this is getting a little bit slower, and if we did hit a bit of peak, that could really affect us. So, Daria, have you used those sort of things in any of the sort of factory transformation planning that you've been doing?
Well, now I'm listening to you, I think that would really, really, really help us.
Okay.
we also, would not go too much to the detail of the project, but we also were working within quite some tight deadlines due to also the legal process of the change and HR management and so on. What we did do was more, let's say, a manual twin through VSM and process mapping. We've made actually, again, involving the shop floor employees as much as we could, the new process flow with the boundaries that we have introduced and this different layout of the factory that we had to make to adapt to the new strategy. And I only can emphasize the importance of this if this tool would be available, because as I said, we were in a time constraint, but also we were in a system constraint, I would say. But then coming back from summer break, when we had to restart in the whole new setup, I should say that the management team did their utmost to make sure that information is there, instructions are there, etc. But we did face a lot of unestimated issues, exactly as you said. This thing takes 3 minutes more, that thing takes to bring from the warehouse another 1 minute more. So that is something that would really help us to run through, obviously, before. Where I do have some experience with this is more within the decision-making process within planning. The tools that we use from Kinaxis, they allow to run scenarios to understand the impact. So this is more operational management, and obviously not the change management.
Yeah.
But one thing I noticed, which may apply to the transformation project also, is not to fall to this analysis paralysis state, because you can simulate then options out of your as many as you want your imagination to take, right? And I think it's important to still again to come back to CTO as well, to have the team who still keeps the focus of what exactly we're trying to achieve with that, and what are the key parameters you want to measure when you are simulating the scenarios versus what you're doing today and what will happen later on. So that would be my humble input on this topic.
Yeah, no, great, thank you. And Pavan, what are your thoughts on the value of modeling digital twins and so on in planning for supply chain change?
So definitely valuable. Like that's the obvious, right? And again, a Far East headquarter, big pharma co, right? And in pharmacies, basically pharmaceutical industry, M&A is quite much the trend, right? Like it's part of the consolidation and so on. So when you are either bringing in more brands, right, which basically is going to go load your supply chain, right? So if you had a digital twin, and Daria mentioned Kinaxis, right? Like it's still part of your tactical supply chain, you could still model the network. You would know what is the impact of that increase in volume through my network, right? Or if you actually, whether adding a capacity or changing a flow of supply, right, is very fast and easy through scenario planning, right, as you pointed out, to see the impact. So definitely valuable if you could have the digital twin. But if you look at a base below, right, digital twin is a tool and completely behind it, right? If you have it, there is value. But if you don't have it, a level below is basically ability to see and sense the impact, right? And that's critical to change, because I often say this, when you're basically appraising program management, you need to focus on the ability to look at plan B. That's the resourcefulness indication. The plan A is there, like everybody can make it, right? With some level of, but the ability to create that plan B with agility is the key factor, right? So I would say, yes, whether it's digital or not, the ability to sense that impact and create a twin and model it is very much important to change management. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you for those insights. Great. Let's move then to our third agenda point, which is tools and techniques to manage expectations and mitigate risks during operational change. So I guess it ties in with what we've discussed already, but also particularly perhaps on the people side of things, the fact that as we recognise, new initiatives always need people to adapt. And it's worth thinking also that, it'd be interesting if you've got examples there of where it's affected customers, and customers maybe need to adapt to what has been changing, as well as your own colleagues and workforce. So turning back to you, Amy, what's your advice on how to manage this critical part of change of the people side of things?
Yeah, people side actually is always sometimes could be the most complicated part of the whole change management. So, as also mentioned earlier, it's as early as the preparation stage, it's always worthwhile to communicate with the people, with related external and external stakeholders of the purpose of the change management. Try to get them on board to understand why the purpose of this program. And to get them on board, what they need, what is their feedback, or what they would like to see after the implementation, because it could be something that hasn't been reflected before the project implementation, but it turns out to be one of the important parts that need to be included in the project. I think the some of the tools we use for the project management itself, Gantt chart is always a good tool to manage the key scope, the key milestone of the overall project progressing. But from the soft people side, normally we have a regular meeting with either with a one-to-one project meeting with a key stakeholder of the project, or sometimes we have the whole team, the team involving all the members of the project, so everyone can understand the latest progress and the feedback from all the key stakeholders. And from this meeting, it's a good it's a good way to understand, to see how the progress is going, if the people's feedback on this, they're on it, or they are struggling with it, and keep measuring all this, keep monitoring the subtle vibe of these meetings, and try to figure out what is the area that you need to, as the project manager, that we need to put extra resources on. And it's always important to remember that is an ongoing process. Like sometimes even after the project, the transformation project is completed, it's still worthwhile to keep the communication on, to make sure everyone has achieved what their initial target.
Yeah. Okay. No, lots of good advice there. Daria, turning to you. I mean, I guess also there's, I don't know if you want to comment as well. There's often, there may often be a fear factor, especially if it's a project about efficiency and new systems. People think, oh, you're just going to get rid of our jobs, sort of thing. So have you come